Yesterday we brought on the Gemara in Shabbos that said that if you trap a chilazon and you squeeze it, you're over, according to Rabbi Yehuda, besides for tzeidah, you're also over for potzeiah. Potzeiah, squeezing out the dam, which is a tolda of dash, threshing, separating the husk, the shell, from the inner grain. And Chachamim only disagree with that because they hold that dash has to be something which is gedulei karka, and by a chilazon it's not gedulei karka, and therefore there's no chiyuv. But otherwise, mitzad etzem potzeiah, mitzad etzem squeezing out the dam, there would be a malacha of disha. Now, the supporters of the murex want to bring a raya from this Gemara from the lashon itself. The lashon of potzeiah, they say, is used in Torah, it's used in Chazal, in Mishnayos, in Gemaras, usually referring to cracking, crushing something with a very hard surface. Kornus, a hammer from a blacksmith, potzeiah-dash, to crack open nuts. So you see that the word potzeiah usually refers to, there's other ayahs that they would crack somebody's skull, also a hard surface, and therefore, if it sounds like it's a hard surface, it sounds like the chilazon has some type of shell around it, and that the malacha l'chayra is for cracking open the shell. Now, besides the fact that the lashon is not mashma like, it is not necessarily at all mashma like that, and I would like to quote Rabbi Per. He wrote a letter, Rabbi Per Senior, and he wrote that I want to discuss the meaning of the word potzeiah. And it says, by those who follow the murex, their understanding is that the connotation in potzeiah is cracking a hard shell. Sad to say, that's inexplicably mistaken in their understanding. In both the lashon of Torah and in Mishnah, potzeiah carries no connotation of a hard object. One of the numerous such examples is the Mishnah in Ksubis, Mem Gimel Amud Beis, potzeiah-dash. If somebody hurt somebody on her face, in other words, he made her face bleed. He wounded her face. According to the Radak, he brings down in Sefer HaShorashim, he says potzeiah, brings down what the word potzeiah, the definition of potzeiah is. Potzeiah refers to cutting open a smooth surface, splitting, cutting, or wounding. Brings down other Rashis that say like that. So in its usage of splitting, that's what, now he says, the Gemara that says, potzeiah-dash, to crack open nuts, it doesn't mean to crack open nuts. He says what Chazal over there mean is, it means to split open a nut. Because anytime you have a smooth surface, or anytime you have anything and you split it, that's called potzeiah. It doesn't matter if it's hard or if it's soft. And as a matter of fact, he brings a small experiment, and he says, why did Chazal use a lashon of a cornice, a hammer made by a blacksmith hammer, to crack open nuts? And he says, a small experiment demonstrates why the Gemara there speaks of using a cornice, a blacksmith's hammer, for opening nuts. When a walnut is struck smartly with a light, very light hammer, a quarter of a pound hammer, along the seam where the halves join, the shell at the contact point is crushed. That's not what you want. But when you merely tap it with a heavy 1 1/4 hammer of a blacksmith hammer, which is a heavier one, it splits in half all the way around. So simply the reason why potzeiah means splitting. Potzeiah means to cut something. It doesn't mean at all in Chazal necessarily. It could refer to also hard things, but it doesn't necessarily mean in its definition that it means to crack something hard at all. So that's, as far as that's concerned, that's number one. Number two is if you look in Rashi, over there in the Gemara in Shabbos, by potzeiah-dash, Rashi's very careful, and Rashi says, you squeeze it with your hand. Now you cannot crack open a shell of a murex with your hand. And you can't even get to the inside snail without cracking the outside shell. There's no way. There's a very small entranceway. It's closed from all the way around with the shell. You need a hammer. You need some sort of thing, which is what they do today, which is what they did then. They found the shells cracked exactly against that gland, and they obviously used some type of a hammer to crack it open. So Rashi in Shabbos clearly says that the way you do it is doich kaviyadai. Number 3 is l'chayra. There would not be an isser of disha, of threshing, which is pulling out the dam, separating the dam, just by cracking the shell. Cracking the shell is the outside covering. Avada, in order to be over for disha, you would have to take out, like Rashi says, take out the dam. So why would Chazal say that the isser is potzeiah, which according to them means a very hard surface, which means that according to them the isser of dash over there would be for cracking the outside, which l'chayra wouldn't pass. And number 3 is the isser of dash is for separating, extracting the dam from the chilazim. That they're not doing at all. And they never did that. That's not when they did the murex. That's in the olden times when they used the dye from the murex, and today when they use it, they don't extract it from the animal, from the chilazim. What they do is they open it up, that area, and they cut off the gland, which has nothing to do with the malach of disha. Disha would be if they somehow made a little cut in that area and pulled out the dam, which is not really possible to do, and pull out that dye that's in there. That was baby bead, which is not what they do. So Rav Shlomo Miller says that as far as he's concerned, the most that you would do, which is the Gemara doesn't say, which is in Self Akasha, is when you cut off that area of the animal, of the murex, when you cut it off, you take it out and you cut off that gland. That should be an isser of geizes, if anything, which is like shearing wool off an animal, and it's more in the halacha that if you cut off, let's say, a finger, suddenly you cut off some aver of something, you're going to be over an isser of geizes. So you're not pulling out the dam, you're cutting off that gland, and if anything, you'd be over the isser of geizes, not the isser of threshing, which is disha. That's one aura. There's another short aura also, Rabbi Per asked, and I think it's a very, very stark aura, and I didn't find a satisfactory teretz to this kasha, and that is that the Rambam says, what is the halacha, what is the shear of dash? You take tvua and you separate the thing, what's the shear? So the Rambam says the shear is a gregris, which is a dried fig. That's the shear. You have to take out an amount of a gregris. Now, in wheat, in this Gemara, a murex has less than a drop of liquid, of secretion that comes out. It's never shy of close to taking out a gregris. And the Pashtus, everybody that seems to them on, even the supporters, that this Gemara is not speaking about that you open up 15, 20 different chalzainis, because the Gemara says for tzeidah, l'char you'd be chayiv for many of them if you trap many of them, and therefore Pashtus Gemara is saying a tzad chilazim, you took one chilazim, about potzeiah, and you were potzeiah that one chilazim. Now if you're potzeiah one chilazim, and the Rambam says that the shear for disha is a shear of a gregaris, which is a dried fig, you're never ever going to have such a shear on a murex. It has such a minute amount of secretion, you're never going to be shy. So the supporters say that that is not necessarily correct. And the reason being is because the Kesef Mishnah over there on the Rambam says that which the Rambam says that you need a shear of a gregaris, which you won't find by a murex, is only by disha, by things of food, only by oichlim. But the shiurim, if you're dash something which is not an edible thing, not something that you're dash for achila, then the shear would be appropriately by each thing what would be negeh for its malacha. And so therefore they say that l'chayr over here, the shear should have been the same shear of what would be considered a shear of tzayvei, of dyeing, or libun, which is shear of a sit hakafel. Sit hakafel, according to the Rambam, is a double sit, which is 4 tvachim. That means you would have to take out an amount to dye a string which is 4 tvachim, about let's say 16 inches long. Now that doesn't make it any much better, because in the earlier times when they were priding themselves still with how many you need, how many chilzainis you need, how many murexes you need per beged, they were talking about maybe 100 per a beged. And even later they said, okay, when this kash sort of came up, they said you need 40 per beged. Now, the halacha is, I believe that what they mean is, you need 1 string out of the 8 strings to be dyed with the chilazim. So you're talking about 4 strings on the whole beged, and they said that the lowest that's possible is 40 chilzainis. You're going to need 40 murexes to dye that. So if you need 40, you're talking about 5 per 40 chazayis. You're going to need 10 chilzainis per string. And you're going to need 10 chilzainis per string, 10 murexes to dye one string. There's no way in the world that you're going to be able to dye from one murex a sita kafel, which is 16 inches. So, it doesn't add up. I mean, if it means a greatness, for sure it doesn't add up. But even if it means you need a sita kafel, and you're talking about opening up one chilazin, so you're never going to get to that shear. The only thing that they do answer is, and it's not satisfactory, is they say, who gave a shear to a string? I mean, you could split a string into little threads, and little until it's like you hardly see it. He says, so if maybe the Rambam is saying that if you say has such a thin string, that maybe it's possible. Maybe you'd be chayiv if there's enough to be tzedeh a couple. I don't believe that that's satisfactory.